Greetings and welcome to my resume on the Outriders demo. Outriders is a third-person looter shooter made by the Poland-based dev team People Can Fly, known for their works on Gears of War for Windows and most notably the title Bulletstorm. It would seem that we finally have a release date for the game. Strangely enough, release day will be on April 1st, given that it is merely one additional month. Let us hope the game is not turning out to be an April Fool's joke and we get our hands on an enjoyable experience. Until then, we have a demo to explore and the characters created and the progress made in it carry over to the release version of the game, which is rather uncommon these days. The demo features the opening hours of the game's story and a couple of side objectives to complete. The story can be summarized as followed. As the last remnants of humanity fight for survival on the planet Earth, two colony ships populated with settlers and so-called Outriders are sent out into space heading toward the habitable world of Enoch. Only one ship arrives at its destination while the other ship is lost in space. The main character and several other Outriders are sent to the planet's surface to scout for a suitable area to establish a first colony. At first glance, Enoch appears to be a lush and habitable world, but we have all seen our fair share of sci-fi movies to know what will happen next. Alien planets rarely are what they appear to be at first glance. Surprise! Enoch has many dangers in various forms, ranging from hostile carnivorous creatures to lethal flora. Oh, and there's black alien goo too. What more can you want, right? Most importantly, Enoch is ravaged by mysterious energy storms. Obviously, the Outriders encounter one of these storms while investigating the origins of a mysterious signal originating from one of the probes sent to Enoch's surface and immediately get wiped out, or should I say blown away, with the main character barely surviving the stormy encounter. After that, infighting breaks out among the first explorers sent to Enoch's surface. The main character gets severely wounded during the ensuing battle and is put into cryostasis. 3 decades later, the main character is rudely awoken from cryostasis and must come to terms with the fact that the once serene planet of Enoch has been, in part, turned into a barren wasteland due to continuous fighting among different factions that were formed by the surviving colonists. Due to unlucky circumstances, the main character has another encounter with the aforementioned energy storms. Reminiscent of Riddick trying to outrun the scorching heat on the planet Crematoria, the main character attempts to do the same, but is surprisingly unsuccessful and gets impaled by debris hurled forth by the storm, and additionally struck by a mysterious energy blast originating from the storm itself. Rather than killing the protagonist, the storm turns him, or her, into an immortal superhuman. From here on out, you, as the player, can choose between one of the 4 classes featured in Outriders. Devastator, a tanky close-up fighter with the ability to manipulate the planet itself and turn its surface into a deadly weapon. Trickster, a nimble roguelike fighter with the ability to manipulate time and space. The Pyromancer, a fighter focusing on wreaking havoc with fire-based attacks. And last but not least, we have the Technomancer, a technophile with the ability to manipulate machinery, conjuring forth various weapons to its aid. From here on out, the story for humanity's survival and the search for the origin of the signal on Enoch take its course. From what we know of the story so far, I must admit that I'm rather intrigued by its premise, and I truly hope that the game's writing will furthermore deliver a satisfactory resolution to the main storyline. No good story is complete without different characters with varying motivations and goals. From what little we have seen of the story so far, I can say that Outriders is featuring a whole set of intriguing and likable characters. Well, some obviously more likable than others. I, for my part, did get a good chuckle out of the player-controlled character's reaction to certain events in the story. The big bad of the story seems to be a guy called Moloch. His motivations and goals are yet unknown. While a lot of the story development and dialogue is happening in pre-composed cutscenes, quests also feature dialogue options, which can be selected by the player. As an added bonus, the whole game is fully voiced and the characters' performance have been overall very good so far. There is one issue spanning through all the cutscenes though. Someone apparently thought that Shaky-Cam was the way to go, so every single cutscene and every dialogue is tarnished by nauseating camera shake, with shaking ranging from mildly discomforting to outright vomit-inducing at times. Hopefully this will be addressed and, if not completely removed, at least toned down a bit in the release version of the game. Another gripe I have with the demo is the level design. Despite the game world appearing to be grandiose in scale and varied in its appearance, most of the early game takes place in bland, similar-looking locales. All this is further amplified by the narrow and simplistic map design, fully lacking alternate routes or vertical elements. My hope is that farther into the story, with the world opening to the player, the maps will also increase in scope and variety. Incidentally, every looter-shooter needs to have a solid combat gameplay and a satisfactory 30-second gameplay loop. Outriders gameplay is comprised of decent gunplay supported by abilities on rather short cooldowns that are unique to each character class. This keeps the gameplay from slowing down too much. Additionally, each character's unique healing mechanic almost forces you to stay in the fray of combat to survive, rather than hiding behind cover. In my opinion, shooting a lot of the guns feels appropriate to their respective categories. Well, what do I mean by that? For example, sniper rifles are hard-hitting weapons at a distance, mostly resulting in one-hit kills when aiming at the enemy's head. Medium-range options incorporate light machine guns, assault rifles, as well as submachine guns. Shotguns, on the other hand, are your typical close-quarters choice. They make short work of the enemy if you can get close enough. And there's also your sidearm, a sort of last resort weapon with infinite bullets to boot, but less lethality than the aforementioned weapon categories. Well, enough talk about shooting, and let us talk about the things getting shot, aka the enemies. Outriders seems to feature a whole variety of different enemy types, be it in their looks or in their behavior and combat. You have your normal fodder enemies with not many HP points that you will easily be able to chew through with your guns and abilities. Then there is the slightly stronger shielded unit indicated by a shield icon right beside their health bar. The second strongest enemy type seems to be the so-called captains, which in essence are altered by the storm like the main protagonist, thus granting them similar abilities. Last are actual boss-type enemies with exceptional amounts of HP. In addition to that, they also employ various abilities to keep you on your toes. Enemies also react appropriately to getting shot by visibly recoiling from bullets impacting them. Charging enemies even stumble when getting hit. What elevates the gunplay above normal for me is the existence of so-called mods, which, when applied to a weapon, alter the effects said weapon has on the enemy or grant the player benefits to their survival. Mods come in 3-tier categories and can be salvaged from weapons that the player deems obsolete. For example, you can equip your basic light machine gun, seen here, with the mod called Burning Bullets, which then applies the burning status on an enemy, damaging them over time. As mentioned earlier in the video, each class has a host of unique abilities to their disposal. While shooting your guns represents a major portion of the gameplay, abilities make combat less monotonous. The demo grants you access to 4 abilities per class, with more abilities being unlocked once your character reaches a higher level. Each character class can choose 3 abilities to employ in combat. As with guns, mods also play a major role in altering your character's abilities, from granting you an additional use of the ability before it goes on cooldown, to modifying the effects completely in various ways. Ability mods are slotted into your armor pieces rather than into your weapons, with rarity levels of the items being a determining factor of how many abilities can be slotted into one armor piece at a time. Especially the modding system, in addition to skill trees with numerous perks, promise to provide various and interesting ways to build and customize your character and mold them into the ideal killing machine. A point of concern is the game's cover system. By pressing space, your character hunkers down behind cover. You can sprint from cover to cover, as well as taking shots from behind your fortified position, while at least in theory. Sometimes this mechanic stops working altogether and obstacles that appear to be cover cannot be used as such. Your character won't stick to them, in lack of a better term. Enemies are also very quick to chuck grenades at your location with pinpoint accuracy, I might add, to flush you out of cover. Since the game already favors fast-paced and hyper-aggressive gameplay over slow and deliberate cover-based movements as a means to survive, I have generally found it more satisfying and efficient to rush and overwhelm the enemy with relentlessness, while considering retreat behind cover as more of a last resort tactic at best. Graphics are a blast, with not much to say honestly. The game looks good, not outstanding by any means, but definitely good. It is making decent use of the capabilities of the 4th gen Unreal Engine, which is obviously a very solid and capable engine. Well, there's one thing I want to briefly mention. I did particularly like the characters' skin textures. Yes, I know, weird. With their porous and uncompromising detailed looks, which are especially noticeable in the game's cutscenes when the lighting is properly set up. Even modern games skimp out on important details like believable skin all too often, which is exceptionally hurtful to RPGs in my opinion, where the game relies on face-to-face conversations with other characters. However, I did notice some inconsistencies of the game when it comes to performance. The frame rate would generally fluctuate heavily, sometimes dipping down to the low 40s, especially in the city hub area. In those cases, GPU load would equally drop significantly. In a best case scenario, the game would rarely use more than 90% of my RTX 2080 at a set resolution of 1440p and a frame rate kept at 141 frames per second. Even playing around with the in-game settings did not change much in terms of performance. I'm confident that those issues will be in part remedied by the addition of NVIDIA's DLSS in the release version of the game, and I hope that further optimization of the game takes place before release. In summary, Outriders appears to be a solid looter-shooter game along the lines of a Diablo with guns. The gunplay feels solid and the overall satisfaction of combat is elevated by the unique abilities the 4 classes of Outriders bring to the table. The game sports in an intriguing sci-fi story with interesting and likable characters to boot. If you want to check out the demo for yourself, you can click on the link in the description below the video. Thank you for watching my video and have an amazing day.